I'm going to talk, I think what it says in the agenda is how the email threat vector is changing, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then I'm going to, in the second half of what I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about AI and what you need to bear in mind if you're thinking about deploying technology that uses or claims to use AI in response to that. Why is that important? Why is it important that we care about email? Well, the honest truth for me, I'm ashamed to admit this, but I work in my inbox. I know I shouldn't. All the productivity guys tell me, think about the work you're trying to do, don't get distracted, but the reality is I work in my inbox for most of the day. And I think for most knowledge workers, that's probably more true than we'd like it to be. The problem with that is it makes it risky. It's where the risk is. Because if you think about what our work surface is and what that comprises, which is people, it's the communications, and then it's the data, they're quite nice things for a malicious actor to go after. And the threats, classify them, classification's always dangerous, but I'd put them down into some malicious actors coming in, doing what they want, specifically targeting that communications domain as a juicy target. It's employee error, right? I make mistakes. The people in your organization make mistakes. They will, right? There's no way around it. I was talking to a chap earlier today who, one of their employees did something, and as we're talking about it, you can't figure out how they did it, but they did. No amount of legislation for that is ever going to get away from the fact employees make mistakes. And the third thing is the technology itself is fallible. A trivial example would be what happened to Uber. MFA fatigue. It's actually people turning the technology into a weapon. But also, the technology doesn't catch everything. That's actually one of the things I'll come on and talk about, why people are going towards AI. But that means where we work is where the risk is, and that means we've got to do something about it. Now, the bit that we said we'd talk about, I will talk about. This is data from our State of Email Security report, which is research that Mimecast takes out. And there's a couple of things that I'll draw your attention to. 96% of organizations believe they've seen malicious activity coming directed at them through their email. The way I read that is 4% don't know that it's happening to them, because it's happening to everybody. And that's clearly what we see across all the emails that we are securing and inspecting. We see that there is malicious activity in the email tide. But organizations are reporting that email usage is going up and that the rate of threat inside email is going up. So within that as well, and this is not what users are reporting, it's what we're seeing, there is an increased level of sophistication in that. One particularly worrying piece of data from this report, but it's borne out by from what other people will tell you as well, 2/3, give or take, of companies, if they're attacked by ransomware, will pay. Okay? There's no judgment in this room. Okay? That's a decision that they make. Okay, I've got to get my data back. It kind of says I didn't have the right controls in place for me to be able to deal with continuity in the event of that. But at the point in time, I make the decision to pay and get the data back. Okay. Apart from nearly half of them didn't get the data back. And actually, that puts you on a mailing list in the cyber criminal community for more ransomware. You're actually more likely to be ransomwared again because you've shown a predisposition to pay. So that's a worrying trend as well. There's lots of other bits of data in here. I won't bore you with all of the stuff in the report, but the short version is more email, more threats within there, more sophisticated threats in there, and when you're hit, you have a problem. So one of the defense or responses to that, and there's a lot of vendors downstairs, and we're one of them, people will tell you artificial intelligence is the answer. And I'm not going to say it isn't, but I am going to say think about it. Now, the reason people are saying that adoption of AI is the answer is because there's more stuff and it's more complex, and almost by definition we can't respond to that algorithmically. So you'd say, yeah, some sort of artificial intelligence type solution is the way we respond to that. But there's a lot of hype, and I'm going to give you a 5-minute, a brief idea of some things to think about to navigate through the hype. This is the part where at least one person in the audience is thinking, well, does he mean AI or does he mean machine learning? And if you're not, I'm thinking that, right? I'm usually the guy, if I'm in the audience, I'm usually the person thinking that. And it's a legitimate question, but not for today. Interestingly, one of the answers that AI, ML people will give you is, it doesn't matter as long as you define it correctly. It doesn't matter what you label it as long as you define it correctly. But right now, I'm using AI in the general bit of anything that anybody wants to call AI. And for those of you, if there's a person in the room thinking, well, what if it's just Bayesian learning? That's good enough as well, right? Anything that's not an algorithm, okay? But whatever it is, and whatever we call it, people who deploy it are reporting benefits, okay? They're reporting increased accuracy in detecting threats, okay? That's a good thing. Reporting better threat remediation, again, that's a good thing. Better threat prevention, better still, right? And less human error. So all of these things are desirable outcomes. So why the caution, Malcolm? Well, you'll come to it in a minute. But broadly speaking, AI is a good part of the toolkit. But it is in and of itself vulnerable as well. And you can classify the attacks at the end. We don't have time to go into the details of this, but you can broadly classify the attacks into two big buckets: input attacks and poisoning attacks. So separate conversation, and much as I would love to go into that, I will go off track and I'll go over time. But the point is this: you can fool AI. You can actually get in ahead of it. You can train the models not even to look for what you're doing. And really, really interesting, and if anybody was watching Newsnight last night and the amount of time they talked about China in particular, citizens know this. In China and the UK, we're very, very big surveillance societies. So if you were that way inclined, you can go buy a cap, baseball cap, with an infrared light that shines across your face. No one can see it. Why would you do that? Because it fools the cameras. It messes with the facial recognition software behind those cameras. The cameras can see it, and it fools them. Right? Citizens already know that AI can be duped. Okay, stuff. The infrared caps is maybe the most interesting one. Face paint, makeup. I have 2 teenage daughters. They tell me all sorts of stuff about contouring, but the same principle can actually be used to fool facial recognition. A teenage girl can defeat the best AI facial recognition on the planet. We should think about that before we trust our cybersecurity to it. Because the threat actors also know this. The threat actors know that AI models and the data used to train those models are fallible. And they know that if we, the good guys, blindly trust that stuff, then they can do what they want almost at will. Now again, these 6 classifications we've got here, again, put it down to attack the data, or I can attack the system. And it breaks me down into labels of espionage, sabotage, and fraud. Again, a lot more behind that slide than we have time to go into today. But broadly speaking, the same principles of a teenage girl sophisticatedly, I'm sure that's not a word, applying contouring to the same principle behind defeating facial recognition, the threat actors are doing that on a much more sophisticated scale. And if they know what your model is and they know what your typical data set is, they are very well equipped to be able to do that. But we're cybersecurity, and we're doing this all over everywhere. So every bit of technology domain you can think of, there's some chap on a stage spouting about how AI and ML is used in our bit of it. And I see the next slide. Wherever it is, AI and ML are being used, you just need to be careful with the fact that there's no silver bullet. So the way this is what's called a ROC curve, and again, you don't need to worry about the details of this, but the red line is basically what you'd get if you tossed a coin. That's chance. Anything to the left, above and to the left of the red line, is better than random. And what you're trying to do is get as many positives as you can while maximize the true positives and minimize the false positives. And the fact is, there isn't a perfect AI model. And the fact is that ahead of the fact, you don't know whether that model's any good. It's only when it's tested against real data that you know if it's any good. So that's something that people tend to gloss over when we're talking about AI. And that's where you may hear there's a phrase, an ensemble method. So what you do, you either take more than one AI model, or you combine an AI model with traditional techniques. And it's the blend of those two things that gets you the better result. And that's really, really important. AI only, and certainly one AI model only, is by definition going to be limited. Ensemble is much better. Now, this is the bit where I, as a vendor, technology, I'm a cybersecurity technologist, we've got AI, we use AI in our stuff. Of course we do. But we use it, I'll say judiciously, and we certainly use it in complement to other things. So again, one of the conversations from earlier today, I was talking with somebody about newly registered and newly observed domains. There's a list that exists. Right? I don't need to do any fancy thinking about, is your domain new, because I can just look it up on a list. There's nothing better than me looking against a list and seeing if your name's on it, and if it is, you're not coming in. It's that simple. But I can complement that then with looking at the domain and saying, is it homographically similar to something that might be being attacked? And then I can develop a confidence score, and then I can train a model with that extra layer of information. And that's what we do. We try and use AI at various points in our technology to complement what we've also got from classical methods. AI and ML is a very, very important part of the cybersecurity toolbox, but it augments what we've got. It doesn't replace it. And that doesn't replace people, definitely doesn't replace people, doesn't replace tool sets, and it doesn't replace old-fashioned intelligence. So if you're looking at deploying AI as part of your response, part of your stack, as part of your response, think about where that's going to be and think about why you're doing it. You know, the reasons that the things I said at the start, why people are doing it, to address skills shortage, to address an increased volume of threats, to address an increased sophistication of threats. They're good reasons for doing it. But it's got to be as part of defense in depth, and it's got to be augmenting, complementing, and empowering the rest of the stuff in what you do. From our State of Email Security report this year, I think 92% of people said they're planning to deploy it. Good thing. That's a good thing, and hopefully people in this room are in that cohort. But figure out where and why. Understand that AI evasion is real. If you didn't know about baseball caps with infrared lights on them, go look it up, and just remember that. Just remember that. Teenagers today, probably within a 1 mile radius of this building, I bet there's at least one with one of those caps for exactly that reason, to avoid being detected on the cameras. If teenagers can do it, well-resourced, well-motivated threat actors can do that and so much more. So while AI is part of the answer, it's not the whole of the answer. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. Oh, hello. Thanks for that, Malcolm. Much appreciated. Has anyone got any questions for Malcolm? If we just bring the lights up a touch. No? Okay. I had one, if I could post one to you.
Go for it.
What do you think has been the biggest change from a technological perspective in the last 2 years, from your particular perspective, your piece in Mimecast, do you think?
The biggest change is the rate at which people are working from home and the acceleration of that statement that says, I work in my inbox, right? So the dependence we've got on the collaboration technology that we use, and probably the extension of that, and also we, in the very early days of the pandemic, we kind of did some shortcutting, and we trained our users to be, we didn't deliberately go out and train them to do this, but by our actions, we trained them to cut corners when it comes to, let's say, good security practice. And that created a much greater risk surface.